Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. The biggest multilateral summit under the Yoon administration, the Korea-Africa Summit, is now in full swing, with delegates and leaders from 48 nations taking part in discussions to build and shape partnerships. South Korea's cabinet has approved the full suspension of the 2018 Inter-Korean Tension Reduction Pact after North Korea sent hundreds of balloons carrying trash across the border. The motion now goes to President Yoon for signing. Inflation here in the country eased to below 3% for the second straight month in May, but fruit prices have yet to be tamed, pushing the government to extend import tariff cuts on fruits into the second half of the year. We begin with the Korea-Africa Summit that has kicked off here in South Korea. The first summit of its kind has been much anticipated. So let's go straight to our Kim Do-yeon, who's covering on-site. Do-yeon, the morning session has just started with the opening remarks. What was said?
Dami, good afternoon. As you said, the summit has kicked off with the morning session well underway. President Yoon, sitting in front of the participating 48 African nations representatives, opened the first session, calling the event historical and emphasizing solidarity to tackle global crises. He also pointed out long-standing relations between South Korea and African nations during tough times. Take a listen.
1950년 6.25 전쟁이 발발하자 아프리카는 파병과 물자 지원을 통해 대한민국의 자유민주주의 수호에 기여해 주었습니다. 1950년대부터 70년대까지 많은 아프리카 국가들이 차례로 독립을 이룩하면서 우리와의 수교는 더 활발히 이루어졌습니다.
He proposed three directions to the participants under the summit's theme of the future we make together. Firstly, shared growth, in which you noted the need to establish an institutional foundation for smooth exchange and cooperation, such as for trade agreements. Secondly, sustainability, which is tackling climate change through a combination of South Korean technology and Africa's young and dynamic population, as well as natural resources. Lastly, he spoke on solidarity, which he emphasized for maintaining peace. He mentioned recent actions by North Korea, calling out provocations including the balloons that carried trash into the south, and asked for support from African nations.
우리 대한민국은 아프리카의 친구 여러분들과 함께 힘을 모아 UN 안보리 결의안을 철저히 이행하면서 한반도와 국제사회의 평화를 지켜나가겠습니다.
Now, Do-yeon, tell us more about the scenes there. It must be pretty hectic due to the scale of the summit.
That's right. Now, we've been reporting this over and over, but this is the biggest multilateral event that Yoon administration has hosted so far here in South Korea, with 48 participating nations and organizations that represent Africa. Just the arrival and welcoming ceremony took more than an hour. Even for the media, the security is very tight, and you can see that reporters from all over the world are here to cover this event. As for the rest of the day, there will be a photo shoot, the closing ceremony, and a joint press conference to wrap things up. Amid all this, President Yoon also will be seeing each leader for short one-on-ones, as is customary for the host nation.
Of course, in the meantime, the first official event-wide engagement was last night at the welcoming dinner banquet. How did that unfold?
That's right. President Yoon hosted a dinner for the participants at Seoul's Silla Hotel last night. Taking the podium, President Yoon's remarks focused on Korea-Africa friendship. He said three things made South Korea's fast economic growth possible: visionary leaders, courageous businesses, and hardworking citizens, and the nation is ready to share its experience with its African partners. Take a listen.
가장 가난하고 어려운 시절을 겪었고 가장 극적으로 경제 발전과 번영의 길을 개척해 왔기 때문에 한국은 아프리카의 진실된 친구로서 함께 미래로 나아갈 준비가 되어 있습니다.
He also pointed to similarities between the culture of Korea and parts of Africa and gave Kenya's national motto Harambee, a Swahili word for meaning all pulled together, as an example. Yoon said that this is a sentiment deeply rooted in South Korean society as well. Mohamed Ould Cheikh El Ghazouani, the president of Mauritania, who also serves as the chair of the African Union, replied in his remarks that he has high hopes for cooperation, which will also tackle global challenges together. There were performances that mixed cultures, and the meal was also a fusion of Korean and African dishes. Tommy?
All right, Toyan, thank you for that report. Now, moving on. On the agenda for the summit starting today is heightening economic cooperation, as Seoul aims to serve as a bridge between the developed and developing worlds. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details and potential partnerships to explore between the two.
Africa is an extremely diverse continent with a wide range of low, middle and high-income economies. The World Bank dubs Sub-Saharan Africa the world's largest free trade area, with a 1.2 billion person market, as well as being rich in natural resources. This is what makes the continent an attractive partner for economic cooperation, as the issue of secure supply chains for raw materials becomes more and more important in South Korea. During the 4th Korea-Africa Forum back in 2016, both sides agreed to enhance their economic cooperation, as well as collaboration in other sectors such as science and technology, human resources, and fostering the younger generation. But over the past 10 years, progress has been somewhat stunted.
It only accounts for about 1 to 2% of Korean exports and 1 to 1.5% of Korean imports. And the big reason for that is that African GDP as a region is still very small.
Africa's global share of GDP is around 5%, while South Korea's accounts for 1.6%. This means that the GDP of the whole region equates to just 3 times that of South Korea. The low GDP combined with the geographical distance has made trade difficult, along with the political instability in certain areas that have made it a risky region to do business with. However, the International Monetary Fund has set optimistic forecasts for economic growth in the sub-Saharan region, predicting that this will rise from 3.4% last year to 3.8% this year after 4 turbulent years.
We have to remember that the African continent's share of population is about 18%. So they have a vast room to grow, and they are less developed, so they have a lot of demand for infrastructure investment. And in order to make infrastructure investment, they will have a lot of demand for financing.
South Korea and Africa also share a major issue affecting many regions around the world: global warming, which affects crops and other natural resources. Consumer prices in South Korea are skyrocketing with large price hikes for fresh produce, while the World Meteorological Organization reported that more than $8.5 billion worth of economic damages were wrought in Africa by climate-related hazards in 2022. With this shared interest in tackling global issues and untapped potential in trade and infrastructure investment yet to be explored, the summit, talks and business forum are expected to boost economic cooperation in the future. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
And fostering cultural exchanges like tourism often plays a pivotal role in connecting and promoting cross-cultural understanding. And hopes are high that doing so will break down barriers and build bridges for South Korea and Africa as well. Yoon reports.
The 2024 Korea-Africa Tourism Forum has opened a new chapter in tourism diplomacy. Joining hands with the Korea Tourism Organization and the United Nations Tourism, South Korea's Culture Ministry hosted the forum participated in by the President of Mauritius and ministers from across Africa, including Nigeria and Namibia. Seoul's Four Seasons Hotel was the host venue for the first ever high-level tourism diplomacy talks between Korea and Africa. The forum on Monday had the theme of forging strategic partnerships for sustainable tourism diplomacy. The discussion's main focus was to delve into strategies for enhancing cultural exchanges and fostering investment cooperation within the tourism sector between Korea and Africa.
Africa is the world's youngest and most vibrant region. It stands with endless potential for collaboration with South Korea. Tourism is believed to be a vital bridgehead in fostering a mutually beneficial relationship between Korea and Africa for the future.
President Prediat Singh of Mauritius also shared his expectations for the forum, aiming to exchange ideas and best practices with South Korea.
For the African continent, the tourism industry constitutes a key sector contributing around 6% to its GDP. Korea, on the other hand, is a world leader in innovation in the tourism sector, and its attractiveness have become remarkable.
He added that Mauritius could learn from South Korea in terms of strategies and foster partnerships given that tourism offers from Mauritius are complementary. The CEO of Africa Tourism Partners, Kwakie Dongko, proposed improving the trade of tourism products in the private sector as well as investments. But he did highlight the importance of enhancing connectivity through people, saying that when it comes to social and cultural exchange, there was no better opportunity.
Make sure that these Africans in Korea and then the Koreans in Africa become our ambassadors in both destinations to make sure.
The first step in unlocking the tourism potential between Korea and Africa is to encourage active participation among people to raise awareness. As part of this, after the forum, participants visited the photo exhibition Invitation to Africa at the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History. The exhibition aims to promote a positive image of Africa and foster growth in the continent's tourism sector by featuring 38 photographs that showcase tourist destinations from 27 African countries. It will be open to the public for free until June 7th. Lee Eun-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's cabinet has passed a proposal to suspend all clauses of the September 19 Inter-Korean military agreement. In a meeting organized by Prime Minister Han Duck-soo on Tuesday morning, the cabinet passed the motion proposed by the Presidential National Security Council the day before. Now, the decision follows North Korea's recent series of provocations, including sending hundreds of balloons carrying waste. The National Security Council said on Monday that the North's recent provocations pose a real threat and harm to South Korean citizens and proposed suspending the Inter-Korean agreement until mutual trust is restored. Inflation here in South Korea has hovered between 2 and 3% for 2 months straight, as consumer prices showed signs of stabilizing. Data from Statistics Korea on Tuesday showed that the country's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, rose 2.7% in May compared to the same month the year before. Fruit prices, though, remained high, with apples and pears costing around 80% more than the previous year for 3 consecutive months. The government announced on Tuesday that it will be extending import tariff cuts for 28 types of fruit into the second half of the year in light of these latest figures, and is adding 4 types of vegetables to the list. South Korea's east coast may be harboring vast amounts of gas and oil that can be used for up to nearly 3 decades and 4 years, respectively. And exploratory drilling work will begin later this year. Lee Si-hoo reports.
On Monday, President Yoon announced that he had approved South Korea's exploratory drilling for potentially vast oil and gas reserves in the East Sea off the southeastern coastal city of Pohang.
저는 오늘 산업통상자원부에 동해 심해 석유가스전에 대한 탐사 시추 계획을 승인했습니다. 사전 준비 작업을 거쳐 금년 말에 첫 번째 시추공 작업에 들어가면 내년 상반기까지는 어느 정도 결과가 나올 것입니다.
President Yoon said at a briefing in his office, there's a high chance the area may contain as much as 14 billion barrels of oil and gas, according to studies by expert organizations, upon request from the South Korean government. He says the amount is judged to be 300 times the amount of resources discovered in an EC gas field in the late 1990s, and about the amount of natural gas that could fuel the country for more than 29 years. And the field could also contain enough petroleum to last the country for more than 4 years. Han Duck-eun, the Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy, said the drilling is expected to begin around December. Han suggested a rough timeline afterward if the drilling does confirm the presence of vast reserves.
If reserves are confirmed, we expect the commercialization process to begin around 2027 to 2028 and commercial production to begin in 2035.
An official at the ministry also explained the success rate of exploratory drilling is around 20%. The government and the Korea National Oil Corporation, along with investments from global companies, will cover the drilling costs. It's expected at least 5 boreholes will be drilled at the cost of over 100 billion Korean won, or around $75 million per drill. South Korea is one of the world's largest buyers of crude oil and gas, according to the Korea National Oil Corporation. The country's energy stocks jumped after the announcement. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
Representatives from multilateral development banks, local companies, and the Korean government gathered here in Seoul for specific talks on ways to strengthen cooperation on climate projects. Our Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
Aiding the overseas expansion of South Korea's environmental industry is what the Ministry of Environment and the Korea Environmental Industry and Technology Institute aim to achieve at the 3rd annual Korea-MDB Green Cooperation Forum.
Our world faces numerous environmental challenges, from long-standing issues to the pressing climate crisis. KT is hosting this forum to facilitate cooperation between the Korean government and multilateral development bankers in tackling these environmental issues.
The forum, which took place on Monday in Seoul, seeks to provide South Korean green tech companies with opportunities to network with MDBs. As international financial institutions that provide economic support for developing countries, MDBs have increased their climate project financing to more than $63 billion from 2016 to 2020.
There is an opportunity to collaborate with MDBs in different specific sectors: water and sanitation, water management activities, and also like the waste management.
And local companies can benefit from their participation in these projects in various ways.
For incentive, there are incentives in the sense that I think once the project is developed very well, it's a win-win issue. I think the market opportunities are there.
One local company that's participated in an MDB Green project is Yoon, an engineering and construction consulting company. In 2022, it carried out studies to modernize the existing wastewater treatment facility and sewage systems in Costa Rica to adapt them to climate change.
We consider partaking in MDB projects a very lucrative opportunity because it allows us to enter overseas markets.
And this year, it will participate in the Inter-American Development Bank's project to improve the infrastructure of sewage treatments in 8 cities in Belize. With more opportunities like this to network, Korean firms will find it easier in the future to get involved in green projects by multilateral development banks. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
The South Korean government is set to announce plans to allow hospitals to accept residents' resignation letters. Now, this would give the trainee doctors more options, as until now, they have been unable to find other jobs elsewhere because their resignation letters have not been accepted. In the Health Ministry's briefing this afternoon, it will also likely announce measures to entice the residents to return to work, such as reducing their working hours and providing financial support for their future training. Over 13,000 residents left hospitals at the end of February to protest against the government's medical reform plan, which includes expanding medical school admission quotas. Now, only about 8% of them have returned so far. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told U.S. President Joe Biden that the outline of an Israeli peace proposal he announced last week was not the full plan. Under the pressure from ministers in his coalition government, Netanyahu told his critics that there would be no peace until Hamas is destroyed. Our Shin Ha-young has the details.
Facing strong opposition from far-right members of his coalition to a new Gaza ceasefire proposal, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Monday that a plan announced by U.S. President Joe Biden on Friday was only a partial outline of Israel's proposal. President Biden said Israel had proposed a 3-phase plan that includes a partial and then complete release of hostages, as well as a phased withdrawal of Israeli troops. However, Netanyahu emphasized that the war would continue until Hamas is eliminated.
We are working in countless ways to return our hostages. We have gone the extra mile to bring them back, but during this action, we have maintained the goals of the war, and primarily the elimination of Hamas.
In response to Biden's announcement, Israel's Minister of Finance and the National Security Minister threatened to resign and topple Netanyahu's coalition government if he went ahead with the plan. The U.S. State Department countered increasing Israeli criticism of Biden's remarks by stating that the plan was ultimately an Israeli proposal.
It was an Israeli proposal. Obviously, it was a proposal that they developed in consultation with the United States and Qatar and Egypt, the three countries that have played the mediating role throughout this process, but this was ultimately an Israeli proposal.
According to the White House, during a phone call with Qatar's emir on Monday, Biden affirmed that Hamas is the only obstacle to a complete ceasefire and confirmed Israel's readiness to move forward with terms he set out last week. In a joint statement on Monday, G7 leaders said they stood behind the proposal and called on Hamas to accept it. On the same day, the South Korean government announced its full support for the peace proposal, urging all related parties to promptly accept and faithfully implement it. 신나영, Arirang News.
Preliminary results show Mexico electing its first female president, Claudia Sheinbaum. The former Mexico City mayor is set to begin her 6-year term on October 1st. Lee Seung-jae has more.
For the first time in the 200 years since Mexico became a republic, a female president is set to take office in the country. Preliminary data from the National Electoral Institute showed that Claudia Sheinbaum won between 58.3% to 60.7% of the vote to win the country's presidential election. The 61-year-old takes over her longtime political ally and mentor, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. She also becomes the first Jewish leader of Mexico, having been born to Lithuanian and Bulgarian Jewish parents. A climate scientist, Sheinbaum was also the mayor of Mexico City from 2018 to 2023. Many political pundits see her as continuing the work of Obrador, whose social welfare programs led to the success of the Morena party. The president-elect pledged to stick to her predecessor's policies, which include scholarships for more than 12 million students and pensions for all senior citizens. Sunday's election was also the largest in the country's history, with more than 98 million voters registered. She will begin her 6-year term on October 1st. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
China says its lunar probe Chang'e 6 has successfully collected samples on the far side of the moon and is making its way back to Earth. According to the China National Space Administration on Tuesday, Chang'e 6 endured high temperatures and obtained samples, including soil, from the surface and below the surface of the moon using a scoop and a drill. A report on Chinese state broadcaster CCTV said, following the sample collection, the probe unfolded the Chinese national flag on the side of the moon that faces away from Earth. Chang'e 6 landed on the lunar surface on Sunday morning in the South Pole Aitken Basin Zone. It's expected to return to Earth around June 25th.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. The first day of the trial of US President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, has wrapped up with a 12-member jury sworn in on Monday afternoon in Delaware. Biden is being tried on a felony gun charge, with opening statements set to begin on Tuesday. He is accused of the illegal purchase and possession of a Colt Cobra .38 caliber revolver in October 2018, making a false statement in a firearms transaction record and violating a law that prohibits users of illegal drugs from possessing a firearm. Biden has pleaded not guilty to the 3 charges brought by the Trump-appointed U.S. Special Counsel David Weiss. He has been open about his alcohol and crack cocaine addiction. The case marks the first time in American history that the child of a sitting president is going on trial. He also faces a second trial later this year on charges related to non-payment of taxes. Indian shares set new records on Monday after weekend exit polls projected a landslide win and third term for incumbent Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The country's Nifty index surged 3.59% on Monday, and the BSE Sensex rose 3.76% to both hit all-time highs. The two indices track India's biggest companies. Meanwhile, the rupee saw its biggest one-day gain against the dollar in more than 5 months. While a win by Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party has been expected, new polls project that BJP is likely to increase its 303 seats in the 543-member lower house and claim a two-thirds majority. Such domination would open the potential for amendments to India's constitution. India's Election Commission said on Monday that 642 million of the near 1 billion registered voters had cast their ballots, with the official counting set to begin on Tuesday. Some Parisians have initiated a social media campaign to encourage the city's residents to protest by defecating in the River Seine. This comes after French President Emmanuel Macron and Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo had promised to swim in the river to prove it was clean. The unsanitary protest has been timed to coincide with the reported date of that swim on June 23rd. The French government is spending around $1.5 billion to clean the river ahead of the 2024 Paris Olympic Games, which will use it for open water events, including swimming. 6 white lion cubs at a zoo in Pakistan have been stealing the hearts of visitors. Now just 5 months old, the playful white lion cubs were born to white African lioness Aria and white lion Drago on Christmas Eve last year. The 6 cubs, all males, each weigh a healthy 12 kilograms and have been shown to visitors at Karachi's Dan Zoo since April. They are white in color due to a condition called leucism, which leads to partial loss of skin pigmentation. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
That's all we have at this hour. Arirang News will be back at 2 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.